Can the United States government seize your possessions and your property, even though you have been convicted of no crime and without even any sort of due process? Regrettably, the answer to this question is yes. The way that they do that is through a process that is known as civil forfeiture. Civil forfeiture. And an important case is coming up before the Supreme Court on civil forfeiture, in which the cops seized 2 cars from 2 women in Alabama who had to wait more than a year and a half to get their property back. Neither of them had any means of appealing this. They had no way of going to court about it. So the Supreme Court is going to consider, can the government do this without at least some form of due process of law? Now, this has been going on in the country for a number of years, and there are many cases that illustrate it, some of them small, some of them big. I'm going to talk about just a few of them. A woman named Stephanie Wilson. The government confiscates her cars. They say they're investigating her for a crime because her ex-boyfriend, they say, was a petty drug offender, but no drugs were found on her. No arrests were made. And it took 2 years before the state even allowed a hearing on the property that they stole. In one case, they kept one of her cars and they said they'll give her the second car back if she buys it back from them. She refused. And finally, a judge stepped in and decided in favor of her, and she got her cars back. But think about it, 2 years. What do you do in the meantime? Here's another case, a fellow named Gerardo Serrano. Customs agents apparently searched his car. They found some stray bullets in the car, but they didn't know what the bullets were from. They accused him of smuggling, quote, munitions of war. And they said they're going to confiscate his brand new car. Well, it turns out there was nothing to this charge. They never, in fact, did charge him with a crime, but they told him that he would have to pay $3,800 to contest the seizure of his car. So he pays the $3,800, they cash the check, and then they basically say, we're not giving you a hearing. So here's a guy who's out not only his car, but he's out this added money. So this kind of thing has been going on in America. The most dramatic case actually involves a woman that I had on this podcast. Her name is Amy Sterner Nelson. And I had her on to talk about her dispute with Amazon, because what happened is that Amazon accused this guy of taking kickbacks while he was a dealer, while he was working with and at Amazon. Now, the guy was never charged with taking kickbacks. He was never convicted of anything. But the government, as part of the investigation, this is the part we didn't focus on so much on the podcast. We focused on the Amazon side. But essentially, the government confiscated almost $1 million of Amy Sterner Nelson's family's property. Now, they didn't just take the husband's stuff. They also took Amy's own savings. Amy is a lawyer. She also has started a startup company. So she had assets, and the government was like, we're putting a hold on them. And so this is something that the Nelsons were able to fight. They were a couple with some resources, and they also did a GoFundMe to raise money. They, by the way, had to move out of their house. They had no savings. They were on the verge of ruin, but they were able to contest it, and finally they got at least a partial judgment in their favor. And what I mean by that is that out of the $1 million that the FBI took, they agreed to return $525,000. Carl and Amy would lose $109,000. The rest was eaten up by court fees. So think about it. You start out with $1 million gone. You get about a half of that back. Well, that's better than nothing, but you're still out a considerable amount of money, and you've expended a good deal of it, over $100,000 in legal fees. Now, according to an investigation by Reason magazine, quote, state, local, and federal governments have seized $68.8 billion via civil forfeiture over the last 20 years. And very often the people whose stuff they take can't afford an attorney to fight back. Think about it. When you are accused in a criminal trial, if you don't have money, the government will provide an attorney. That's constitutional law, but this doesn't apply to civil cases. If someone sues you, for example, for violating a contract, if someone sues you for defamation. Remember, civil forfeiture is a civil matter. They're taking your stuff. Their pretext is often we suspect you of a crime or you're being investigated for a crime. But guess what? They often don't file any charges. So no crime ever enters into the picture, and yet your stuff is gone. But because you aren't facing criminal charges, you're not entitled to a free attorney. You have to pay for your own, and many people cannot afford to do this. So this is really a scam. It's nothing more than government thievery, and it's government thievery without due process. I mean, that's the point. The point is that you can't even take this before a court, before a judge, and get a hearing on it. So this is now before the Supreme Court, and I hope that the Supreme Court, I mean, it seems crazy we're even talking about this. We're even talking about the Supreme Court will consider whether in a free country, the US government can take your property, your cars, your jewelry, your money, your possessions, even your house, without giving you any due process and charging you with any crime. This seems downright un-American. It is un-American, and I hope the Supreme Court puts a stop to this business altogether, which is not to say the government can never take people's property, but they can't do it without due process. Bank failures, record inflation, spy balloons, mass layoffs. It's a recipe for disaster if your investments are with a typical financial advisor. But my friend Rebecca Walzer is different. If you watched a few days ago, I had her on the podcast. She gave a very succinct account of what's happening in the world economy. She has a really good grasp of the US economy. She's a wealth strategist, a tax attorney. She has a global MBA from the London School of Economics. She told her clients to get out of equities back at the end of 2021. She got it right when most advisors got it wrong. And who had to pay the price? Well, you as the consumer. Don't let blind loyalty leave you losing money. Call Rebecca Walzer's office today to protect your wealth from the market uncertainty. Debbie and I did a call with Rebecca's team to talk about our investments, and you should too. Go to friendofdinesh.com to book a call with Rebecca's team. You have nothing to lose. That's friendofdinesh.com to protect your investments and your future.